How about now? Test, test, test. Cool. Just give a minute more or two for folks to show up, and then we'll get started. Yep, I can get the link to the slides. Just need one more minute before we get started. All right. So before we get going, any questions from yesterday? Anybody have a chance to play around with GitHub repos and being able to push code, commit and push code? You can totally, if you've pushed code up to GitHub, you can wipe your local files at any point in time, assuming that you don't have any changes that you haven't pushed. You can wipe your local files at any point in time and re-download. That's kind of the trick there, though, is making sure that what you have is pushed up. Otherwise, you can run into a situation where you accidentally delete stuff that you weren't intending to. And we are going to talk a little bit about that today. Link to the slides that we're going to follow along with are here. But before we get going, we're going to do another quick practice just to remind ourselves of what we covered yesterday. So I would like everyone to commit and push to their portfolio repo. The keyword that I'd like for you to put into your index.html is Pepsi. So somewhere in index.html, commit and push the word Pepsi.
Done.
Nice. Okay.
Excuse me, are we in the same file from yesterday? Is that what we're doing?
In your index.html,
Nate, hi, this is Rain. We're putting this in our week 6 folder as a new index.html file. I just got off work, excuse me if it's repetitive.
no, make a change to your index.html inside of your portfolio that we pushed yesterday to GitHub.
Okay.
Just throw the word Pepsi in there somewhere.
Okay, all right.
You just pop open your
Let me open up
GitHub
the
app,
GitHub
it should
module.
be, yeah, it should still be up.
Cool. Looks like a lot of people are getting pretty familiar with doing this.
So I have a question about the repo's name. So we can
Yeah.
just do anything, or it has to be the github.io. Just like a question.
Yeah, good question. It could be anything. Here today, we'll talk a bit about why we named that one repo, specifically how we did. You will not have to follow that naming convention for future repos.
Okay, because I was planning to upload the Netflix that we made together to like I made Gflex. So I want to put it as a Gflex so I know what I'm if I look at my profile.
Totally, do it.
Gflex.
Do not need to tag that whole .github.io.
All right.
Good question.
Thank you.
Amberlyn, can you share your screen real quick? Yeah, it's a little tricky because sometimes, exactly, this is why it's tricky. So if everybody can follow along for a second here, it gets a little confusing because when you open GitHub Desktop, if you open that program behind the browser, Amberlyn, also you're muted right now. Yeah, so if you open up GitHub Desktop and you see that you're missing those 3 buttons to be able to open up VS Code and Finder, they're still there. They're just up on the menu bar. So click back into GitHub Desktop. Yep, and then up here under the repository, up on the file bar.
Okay.
The buttons that you're used to seeing are right here now. So open in VS Code is going to be the one that lets you.
This VS Code is the answer?
Yeah, so go
That's
so go back here, click on GitHub Desktop behind you. Perfect. Now go up here to the repository button and then click open in VS Code. Scroll down a
Open.
little bit more. There it is. Yep.
Okay.
And then that's going to launch VS Code exactly in the right spot. So, yep.
Okay. Thank you.
So Amarilyn, before I let you go, this is one of the things that that we were talking a little bit about yesterday, where we want to make sure that the top of your repository, that special folder that we've been pushing to GitHub, we want to make sure that the top of this is not a folder. We want to see index.html, style.css. We want all of that to be here in this this view. You haven't done anything wrong. It's just that we have I think we have that nested inside of this portfolio folder. If you
Yes.
expand that, is that where the index.html is?
This one?
Yeah, perfect. So
Okay.
what we need to do is bring this out and up one level. So we want to take it out of that folder and bring it up to the top.
Okay.
Does that make
This
sense?
is the one that I wanted to delete because I had put too many index HTMLs. And so this is half Netflix and half the portfolio. It condensed it all
Mhm.
when I did it wrong. So
So which one do you want to use? Which one do you want to deploy to your personal website?
right now I want to delete this and push it in, I guess.
Well, so show me where the index.html is that you actually want to use. Is it inside of the Netflix folder?
Maybe it is. My other file didn't look like that, I think. Okay. No. No. Oh.
Okay.
See, this one has more things on it. Here, this is the one.
This is the same one. It's the same. Oh, sorry, no, it's not. This is in desktop CS5 my code D4 portfolio. Okay.
I took it through from the main file that I did not push into the GitHub yesterday. I just took it back from, I didn't delete anything off my desktop. I kept my other one. So I just pushed that one into this. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Can I take control for a second?
Confusing. Sure.
That's okay. Yeah, so let's take this and move it up just a little bit. All right. So notice this file path here. We are actually looking at your desktop, but over here on the side, what's a little confusing is we're inside of a folder. Like if we click on this, or any of these, you'll notice that we're well, this is a little strange. So let's open this in Finder. Let's see what's going on here. Can you drag that window over here? Thank you. Okay, so let's go up. Yeah, so this is inside of the GitHub folder, which is great. And this is not the index.html that you want. You have another index.html that's sitting on your desktop. Let's go.
And this file over in the corner. The CS5 my code was the one I wanted to put back in there, but
Yeah. So let's just delete this then.
sure.
Get rid of that. And let's get rid of this. And then let's open this up in Finder. So now this is empty. Keep that over there. Let's open that. If you can bring that over.
Bring back.
Perfect. Okay, so now we'll go into week 4. It was D4 portfolio. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. And Bring that over. Now, if we look here at this does look like it's much more filled out. And we have these files sitting flat at the top of the repository, which is what we want. Now, if we go back to GitHub Desktop, it's going to kind of freak out a little bit because it's thinking that we've deleted all those, which we did. We deleted the next Netflix folder. We deleted the portfolio W4 folder, but then we are now adding style.css, weather HTML, indexed HTML, all of those things back in. So let's say replaced. Where we go with correct code.
Okay.
Commit and push. Just want to check really quick. So there's a D4 folder in here. Let's delete that. Commit and push again. Now you're all caught up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Can we explain what the README file is? So in GitHub, there is a special file that will get shown. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. Let me share my screen. So the name of a README file is special in GitHub. So anytime that there is a file called readme.md, and it looks exactly like this, anytime there's a file that's named readme.md, what GitHub will do is it will take the contents of that file and it will put it down here in this preview, which is nice because if you want to give, like if you want to set up a bunch of repositories to show future employers or to have as kind of a reference for the code that you've been working on, it's really nice to put a little description down here and be able to, for people that are interested in your project, to be able to see at a glance what's going on here. For example, I'm just going to pick on one of my projects that I've worked on. So I have some code that I've been working on called Librarian. I talk a bit about what the code is doing, how to get started using it, some instructions, that sort of stuff. So a readme.md is useful for giving folks an idea of what your repo is doing or what your code is doing. Good question. Palash, when you say that you created a new repo and it doesn't show up in GitHub Desktop, you're saying that you went in, you hit the plus to create a new repo up here, right?
Yes.
And then you go into GitHub Desktop and up here at the repo picker, you click add clone repository and it's not showing up in this list.
Gotcha. I didn't clone it. Got it.
Okay. Yep. So you create the special folder on GitHub and then you're basically going to link GitHub with your computer. So you're going to have those two things in sync.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to go back to the README, do you go in and you edit that information and then add it like an overview of what the project is?
Yeah, let me give an example. So I'm working on my deluxe.github.io. So I'm going to go open that up in Visual Studio Code. So this, I just opened up my readme.md. I'm going to add some instructions here. So it is just HTML and CSS. So I'm just adding some instructions for if other people want to use my website to deploy it. I'm going to go ahead and commit and push to update my README. Now notice when I visit my repository, the front page here, now has those instructions that I added. So the readme.md, it's just a text file. You can throw whatever you want in there, whatever you want people to see when they come and visit your repository. Did that answer your question?
Yes, so in order to, when you had the different sections in the one that you showed us before, you started off with the pound
Yeah.
to
So
like bold it.
yeah, do you ever remember like I don't know if you ever did this, but like the old BBC forum posts, like there used to be like a little markup language for posting on forums. It's kind of similar to that. It's a language called Markdown. So if you Google Markdown cheat sheet, this will kind of give you an example of how to format those text files. But basically, it's kind of like HTML, except it doesn't have like the open and close tags. Instead, if you want to make like a header or italicize some text, this is the syntax that you use inside of that file. Does that answer your question? Am I getting a little closer?
Yes, I didn't know about that website.
Yeah, so
Did it,
this
but
is
I
Mark.
didn't know.
Go ahead.
I mean, I saw like how you did it, but I didn't know like there was specific. Like I thought that you edited, and the way that it looked when you showed us the first time, it looked like it was being edited in the GitHub desktop, not like in a separate file and then committed and pushed. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. No, it's just a text file, and I'm editing it using my VS Code.
Okay.
There's no special place that you go to. It's just a regular file. You go in there and you can throw in text and describe your repo however you want. There's just like a little bit of magic, right? Like the magic here is that if you put a file in your repository, in your folder, if you put a file in there called readme.md, the magic is that it will show up here. That's kind of the only thing that you have to know, that readme.md is a special name.
Nate, can I toss in a pointer or two for them?
Please do.
For your README, I was taught just to go in there and tell people what your project is, what it does, and if you can link to where it lives on the web, then try to do that too. So when people go to your README, you kind of wanted to be helpful for them to understand what was behind this project, and anything that's going to help them to navigate your project. And I line jumped Rain. Her hand has been up for a while, or is that up from earlier?
No, I'm just waiting to be called on. Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I have a twofer. It should be quick. One, .md, I believe it stands for Markdown, as you showed us the cheat sheet, but why would we use that opposed to HTML or something else as a source file? Or a source.
Good question. Really good question. Yeah. .md, exactly. It's to denote that it's a markdown file, meaning if you open it up, yeah, it's gonna have markdown in it. Yeah, why not use like HTML? The reason why is because GitHub just decided that they were going to do it that way. There's really not a whole lot of rhyme or reason to it. And I think I may be wrong here. I think you can actually change this to HTML. I'm just going to edit this here on the website. Yeah, so I think that actually the magic is pretty flexible. I think that you can call a readme.html, and as you can see here, it does render the contents of the file on this page. Clearly, it's not rendering it very well because it's no longer doing that nice formatting that the Markdown was doing, where it made a big header. But I think you can, as long as it's called README, I think GitHub's gonna try to open it and display it down here. I think MD and HTML are valid. I don't know about other, like, can we do a readme.txt? Probably.
So would you say that Markdown allows you to archive different types of source code so that they're readable, opposed to just kind of narrowing it down to HTML? It gives us more flexibility. Would you agree
Well,
with that?
Kind of, to a certain extent. It's meant for different purposes, right? Like HTML is meant to be loaded in a browser. Markdown is meant to be not necessarily displayed in the browser. Markdown is kind of used differently. Like HTML, you're going to put source code in, that sort of stuff. Markdown, you're going to use for, I'm having a hard time describing how you use it. You just use it for describing things, like giving people info on what your repo is used for. If you've ever used, gosh, what is the really popular math one? Oh man, I'm blanking on the name, but there are other Markdown languages that Markdown is just one of them. But anyways, just for your own, just for your knowledge, if you put a README in the top of your repo, it will get shown up here, and you can use it as a way to communicate to other people what your code is doing.
Are you referring to a DAT file? I don't know anything about it, but could that be what you're referring to for math?
No, I'm thinking of
Leave it alone.
there's a popular PDF, mathematical PDF Markdown language that I'm blanking the name on right now.
Well, no problem. You've both been very descriptive of what you've told me so far. So for my two-for, not to make this too long. So I noticed that, like, when I edit Pepsi, right, I like to go onto the web browser to modify my stuff, and I should be using the app like you showed us. But if I could just share my screen right quick, I just want to show you the problem that I'm encountering. Okay, hold on one second. Okay, and all right, so this is my GitHub app, right? Can you see it?
Mhm.
Okay, good. So I'm on this particular file, and literally I feel like I should know this, but I do not know how to get back to the main screen to open up my VS. Like, I go here, nothing, here, nothing, in here, nothing. Where do I go?
Right. So go click up in the menu bar up above.
Up here?
The top of the screen, right where it says like file and all that. Yep, up there. Repository.
New
To the right.
repository?
No, the repository branch. Yep. And this right here.
Oh, hold on a second. Oh, hold on. The Zoom thing is on top of it. Okay, repository.
Yep,
Mhm.
and then your buttons are right here. They're all in this section. View on GitHub, show in Finder, open in VS Code. Yep, they're all there.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, before I let you go though, word of warning, try not to use the web editor. Try to use GitHub Desktop. And the reason why is because right now your local files are out of sync with GitHub. If you make changes through the web browser to your repo using the GitHub web editor, you need to make sure that you pull those changes back. You won't have to worry about this if you just use GitHub Desktop, but just be aware, you actually click the button, I think, without noticing this button right here a second ago as you were clicking through those three things. If you make changes on GitHub, you'll need to constantly pull those files down. So just be aware of that.
Now that I know how to utilize it a little bit better, I'll use the actual app. Thank you.
Cool. Yep. All right.
I just wanted to add, the README can be really fun. It's probably going to take you 5 to 10 minutes to figure out what you need to put stuff in there. If you looked at what Nate shared, it's just really easy stuff to put in there. And the other stuff you can just look up if you want to add in a GIF or video tables. It's really easy. I just view it as like a standard that the industry uses to inform people about their projects. But I've seen them in like notebooks and stuff too, when people put together like project notebooks and stuff. So there are different uses for it. But I just wanted to say you can have a lot of fun with your README.
Yeah, absolutely. So Posh, when you're saying you can add a folder to a repo, yeah, it's going to add all the files inside. You don't necessarily need to zip unless, are you running into a situation where you don't want all those files?
No, just wanted to make sure because the HTML has the source of images as folder name / image name.
Yep, exactly. So if your HTML, so let's say hypothetically, if I always think of file directories as levels. So if we think of the top level of that repo and you've got index.html sitting there, if your index.html references something in images / cat.png, then you need a folder called images, and then inside of there you need a file called cat.png. So make sure that you preserve that file hierarchy however you reference it in your code.
Right, but when I like drag and drop it in the repo, it just pulls all the files from the folder instead of the folder itself, right?
Oh no, bring the folder over. Bring the folder. If you reference the images using a folder, so if you have images in the src attribute or however you're calling those images, if you have the word images / in there, then you're going to need a folder called images present in your repo.
Got it. Thank you.
So
All
Nathan,
right.
more out of curiosity than anything else, do developers spend a lot of time on GitHub looking at each other's code? Or, I mean, is there like a community around that? Is there a way to use it beyond just, like, I can't imagine beyond the academy. I'm trying to just understand why I would be in there or looking at code.
Sure. Yeah, let me share an example, and we're not going to get too into the social aspect of coding during this, but one of the cool things that GitHub lets you do, if I go and take a look here, one of the really cool things that it lets you do is it lets you create what are called pull requests. So for example, I was working on some code with a friend. We were actually building a controller for his door. So we were gonna have the door open when people scanned a QR code. So what you could do on GitHub is you can work together on a code base, and then you can suggest changes. So I actually, since we're both working on the same code together, I actually suggested a bunch of changes for, so this is all in Python, but I suggested a bunch of changes to code that that we were both working on. And so what we were able to do using GitHub is I was able to communicate these changes with him. And then we had some kind of back and forth discussion on here about what we wanted to do with the code. So this is kind of the social aspect. So long answer, yes, people use this to coordinate changes to code and to get review on their code. Sometimes having an extra set of eyes when you're working on something can help you catch bugs before they make it into the website. Great question. Unfortunately, we're not going to get too into these pull requests, kind of that social aspect. Really, what we're going to use GitHub for primarily in this program is backing up our code, creating a really nice portfolio, and deploying websites. But there's entirely a social aspect here that come to office hours, and I'd love to tell you more about it. All right. Yeah, and to just to echo what Latonia is saying, I also use GitHub to steal code. Like, I'm not ashamed to say that. I go and like if I'm working on a really tough problem, going and looking up what other people have done and drawing inspiration from it. That's another thing that GitHub is definitely useful for. All right, let's jump in. So what we're talking.
Did Nate freeze for any of you or is, okay.
How about now? Sorry about that. The internet, my co-working is not too great. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, great. So I just want to cover a couple of situations that you might run into. Just think of this video more as reference and ask any questions that you might have, but I'm mostly going to drive because this is going to get into a little bit of a complex stuff here, and I don't want you to accidentally accidentally delete some files. So I'm going to cover a couple situations where you might be working on your code and you accidentally delete something and you're kind of going, what the heck, how do I get back to where I was? So there's really two kinds of situations that you can fall into here, where you've deleted some files but you haven't yet committed. And then there's the situation where you've deleted some files but you've already committed, and we're going to walk through both of these. So for the example where we have deleted some files, but we haven't committed yet, I'm going to show what that looks like here. So let's go back to VS Code. So here I am looking at my portfolio, my index.html, and let's just say that I delete. I've just lost my index.html. And just to make matters a little bit worse, let's go and also delete a couple of the other files here. So I'm really just left with my my README. Before this week, that would be a pretty bad thing, right? We just lost all of our code, all the stuff that we've worked on so far. But really, if you use GitHub and you use Git, this really just is not a big deal. So the way that we get our changes back is we just reopen GitHub Desktop, and because GitHub Desktop is paying attention to what we're doing in this repository, all we have to do is undo these changes. And the way that you do that is you can just right-click on these changed files you see here that Git thinks that we're deleting all these files. To get these back, if you don't want Git to remove these files or to lose track of them, just right-click on them and hit discard changes. And I'm going to do that for all three of these. And now you'll notice back over here in VS Code, all of my files are back. Any questions about that?
Sorry, you did that before you pushed it, the change?
So
You
this
went
is a
in?
situation where I've like, for example, over here, if I open this in, oops, if I open this in Finder, the situation that I'm talking about right now is if I just did that, if I just nuked the files in the folder. I haven't committed, I haven't pushed, I just, for some reason, I accidentally deleted these files. And again, the remedy for this situation where you've just, for some reason, you've lost these files, the remedy again is to just go back in here one by one, right click, discard changes. Other questions? Pretty straightforward, right? If we delete files, just go into GitHub Desktop, right click on them, discard changes. It's kind of a weird way of wording undo, like discard changes. They could have named that something like undo maybe to make it a little bit more obvious what you're doing. But the reason why it's called discard changes is because according to Git, it thinks that you're just making a change, and it just so happens that your change is deleting files. So that's why the funky terminology there for discard changes. So that's scenario one. Really common. You just you run into a situation where you've deleted your files accidentally, and that's how you recover from it. All right, let's go into situation two. So situation two is you've made some kind of change, either deleted code or deleted files, or you've done something, and maybe time goes by and you just don't realize what you've done for a bit. So for example, let's just say that I'm working on my portfolio, and I don't want this about section, so I'm going to delete this whole section about me. And I'm going to go in here. I'm going to say something like, don't want about. So commit, push. Oop, I need to. This is unable to push commits because there are commits on the remote that are not present on the local branch. This is because I made changes. I've made changes on my repo using, remember when we were playing around with the README and we renamed it to readme.html and readme.txt. I'm now in a kind of weird situation where my GitHub repo has some stuff that's different than what's on my machine. So that's what this error message that we just saw was. You can avoid this by never editing files from github.com. You can avoid this weird situation I'm on where I go back to repositories. You can avoid the situation by never going in here and doing what I did earlier, where you grab the pencil and make changes through the website. Don't do that, and you won't have to worry about that issue that you just saw me have to deal with. Try to make your changes using GitHub Desktop and VS Code. That's about it. Okay, so back to the scenario here. So I've deleted my About Me section on this website, and let's just say I keep on going. So I make some changes. Just kind of add some stuff. So like updating the email. All right. Now pretend as if I just realized, crap, I didn't mean to delete the about section. I actually want that code back. I regret having deleted that. So the situation is I've deleted some code. I might have a couple commits that I've already made. I want to go back in time to where I had that chunk of code because I don't want to have to write it again. I just want to go back and figure out what that piece of code was and get it pulled back into my code. You could do that because Git is watching and tracking all the changes that you make. Every time you commit and make a snapshot, you can go back in time to to that commit. And the way that you could go back in time is there's this history column here next to the changes column. We've been mostly looking at changes, but if you flip over to history, you'll see based on how long you've worked on the project and how many commits you've pushed to your repository, you'll see a bunch of these commits. And you can do this now in your GitHub desktop. If you go and click on that history tab, you should see a few of these. They're mostly going to be commits where we were adding Pepsi, Apple, and Orange, but you can go back in time. And the way that you go back in time is you can find the commit that you want to jump, that point in time that you want to go back to. You can find it and right click on it and say revert changes. And what that's going to do is it's going to do the opposite. It's going to revert whatever you did at that point in time. And now if I look at my code, we'll see that about section is back. So I've effectively recovered that change from that point in time. Again, I'll show that one more time. If you have a history, if you've been working on your GitHub project and you ever want to go back and you want to undo a change that you've made, it doesn't matter how far back or how long ago that change was made, you can go in history and you can, first of all, you can see the change. For example, there's the section that we just undid. You can see the change, but you can also undo whatever those changes are, which is just really powerful, because if you're working on a big project or you're working on a really important project, it's really nice to be able to see all the changes that you made and how to go back in time and undo any changes that you didn't intend to make. Any questions so far? This is getting into some kind of advanced stuff, and I'm hoping that most people don't have to deal with this specifically, but these things happen.
Hey, Nate, so this is like a side question. It's back to the dark mode stuff. I don't know if you saw Genevieve's question.
Oh, you put that dark mode on through the website, but the app. Oh, so the GitHub desktop app. Let's see. If we go into preferences, appearance, there's a theme here. Have you tried setting it there? I could see on your screen the white just turned.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. So those are kind of the two situations. You've got this video plus the slides if you ever run into a situation where you need to go back. I have one last tip to share with you. This is the everything is awful, go nuclear option. So let's say, for example, that, and I'm just going to go and royally screw up my GitHub. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to copy and paste that. And how else could I mess this up? Yeah, so let's say that you open up GitHub Desktop and you just have absolutely no idea what's going on in here. It just doesn't make any sense. You have files that look like they're getting deleted, and none of what you're seeing in GitHub Desktop makes any sense. You always have the go nuclear option, and there's no shame in doing this. The only thing that I can recommend is that you just are very careful about what you do. The first thing that you will want to do in go nuclear option, where you're just like, I have no idea what's going on with my GitHub repo and I need a lot of help. The first thing that you could do is obviously message an instructor, a TA for help. But if you want to resolve it yourself, make sure that you have a backup somewhere. And the first place to go and look and make sure that you have a backup is probably going to be GitHub. So check to see if your repository has the files that you expect. If it does, great. You can go and blow away whatever you've got on your machine, and you can pull down a fresh copy of your repo, and you'll be good to go. But the biggest item on the checklist is just to make sure that somewhere you've got a copy of that code. And don't forget that you can do things like go into GitHub Desktop and open up in Finder. Don't forget that you can go in here and take copies of these files and throw them on your desktop or throw them somewhere else temporarily, just to make sure that you have a copy of these files somewhere. So if you ever get into a situation where you're just not sure what's going on with your GitHub repo, make sure you've got a copy of working code somewhere, if not on GitHub, at least on your local machine, and then blow it all away. To do that, you could go up here to the repo picker. You can right click on the repo and hit remove. It's going to ask you if you're sure that you want to delete the repo from your machine. As long as you've got a backup somewhere, you'll be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. At which point I can now go and add back in my repo. I'm going to go and download a fresh copy of it. Now, if I open this in VS Code, you'll see that I'm back to a good working state. I've got index.html, all the stuff in here makes sense. Any questions about that? The go nuclear option? All right. And then the last thing that I have to last just general tip I have for structuring your GitHub repo, try to prefer what we call flat file structures. And by that, I mean, when you visit your repo, prefer having that index.html, the style.css, prefer having that at the top of your repo and not nested inside of a folder. That's what we mean by flat file structures. You can still have an images folder. You can still have an assets folder. You can have all that sort of stuff. Just make sure that the top of your repo has the starting point, which is usually the index.html. If you put this all inside of a folder called code or SRC or something like that, you'll run into problems here later on. So just in general, prefer to have flat file structure. And then, yeah, I'm always going to be pushing you to create repos for your important work. These repositories on GitHub are a great way of showing employers and future prospects that, first off, you know how to code, and second off, the code that you write is clean and structured well. So think of these GitHub repos as not only just backup tools, but also think of these as a part of your portfolio as a software developer. Okay, gonna dig into a little bit of the behind the scenes. I've been throwing a bunch of terminology at you, and I just want to kind of reiterate a little bit what we've been talking about so far. But before I do that, let's go ahead and take a break before we jump into this. So let's do 6:46, back at 6:46. All right, welcome back. Needed a little bit of break because I'm going to go into just a bit more talking, and then we will get into some hands-on stuff here in a minute, and we'll actually deploy to our GitHub pages. Let me share my screen again. All right. So just a little bit of behind the scenes. I've been throwing a bunch of terminology at you, and I just want to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page. So repository, I've been using repository interchangeably with project. Sometimes I've been saying folder, but it is a special folder on your computer, and it's a special location on GitHub. So when you clone something down, you're pulling from GitHub and you're creating a folder on your machine that is linked to the repository on GitHub. They are, the repository is the place on GitHub. Any number of people can create clones of your repository, can create those special folders on their machines. So just remember that a repository is two things. It's at least a special place on GitHub, and then it's also those special folders on your computer that are being tracked by GitHub Desktop. And this is just kind of a diagram to help cement that in your mind. We have n number of clones of that special folder of that repo, n number of different machines that can be working on that code. In this case, right now, we really are just going to be the only ones working on our repos, but any number of folks can work on that. And I just want to stress again, don't forget to make changes using GitHub Desktop. You can kind of get into confusing scenarios if you don't open up your code using VS Code, and if you still have a copy of your portfolio somewhere else and you still have a VS Code window open to that old code, you might make changes and be like, well, why isn't it showing up in GitHub Desktop? Again, make sure that you're doing your code editing through GitHub Desktop inside of that special folder. And just to call out again what that folder looks like, it's inside of your documents GitHub folder. That's where GitHub Desktop, when it makes clones of those folders, clones of those repositories, that's where it ends up living on your machine. So it's not going to be on your desktop. It's not going to be inside of that CIC folder that you downloaded before that has all the examples. It's going to be inside of Documents GitHub. Any questions on that so far? I feel like I've already said this before. Just want to make sure that everybody knows. Okay. And then this was already asked earlier, but commits, those are those little snapshots that we take of our code in time, then they get pushed up to GitHub. By themselves, commits we can create hundreds, if not thousands, of commits on our machine, but it's not until we push them up to GitHub that they're actually backed up and people can see them. And yeah, one analogy that I like to use for commits, if you are familiar with Google Docs and how Google Docs does its revision history, how you can make changes in a Google Doc and see, who made what change, and you can go back and look at revisions. That's really how commits work, is they're just snapshots in time. And as I showed earlier, you can rewind time. You can look at your code at those previous points in time. Okay. All right. Now what we're all here for, how do we actually deploy? So I really don't like being that person, but I'm going to use the term the cloud, and for fun, can somebody explain to me what the cloud is? Explain it to me like you're explaining it to your parents. The more condescending, the better. I'm just kidding. Can somebody explain to me what the cloud is?
Oh, the cloud is basically a storage that is not at your house. It's someplace else.
The cloud is a filing cabinet that you put files into. If we're saying it to our parents. Yeah. And they do not disappear, or they're never destroyed. And how would I explain the server part though to parent?
Is the key to access this cabinets. Kind of. And
It's a Rolodex that you
But so jokes aside, so yeah, this is all pretty accurate. You know, the cloud means any number of things. Someone else's computer is pretty popular. Everybody kind of throws it around. It's just that it makes me cringe almost as much as the word DevOps, just because of how overloaded a term it is. But in our case, the cloud really is just going to be one of these vendors that we pick to host our website. That's kind of it. And we'll drill a little bit into the specifics here. But before we get into looking at all the different options that we have for deploying to, let me ask, why can't we host the website on our MacBooks? Anybody think of a reason why? Like our portfolio. And eventually when you get to the capstone, whatever your capstone ends up being, why wouldn't we want to run those off of our MacBooks? We don't have enough.
running on Linux?
Sorry, go ahead.
Is it because Mac is running on Linux?
Mac is running on Linux. Good observation. Yeah, Mac is using a variation of Linux. But most of the servers that you use for deploys are Linux based. So Linux actually works really well for services. Don't have enough storage. That's actually a really good reason. Let's say that our service was, let's say that for your capstone, you wanted to build a image hosting service. Yeah, your Mac maybe has 512 gigabytes. You couldn't run a successful image hosting service off of your MacBook. You'd pretty quickly fill up your machine. Eva brings up a really good point. No one would find it. That's a really good observation. Yeah. Just because you're serving it off of your MacBook doesn't mean that anybody would be able to access it. Our MacBooks aren't easily discoverable on the internet, and that's intentional, right? Like if our MacBooks were readily discoverable, like for example, Taylor, if I were able to find your IP address and be able to SSH into your MacBook or start a remote session on your MacBook and start moving, the cursor around, and if your MacBook was easily discoverable, if other people could find it, that would be a big security risk. So that's a really good observation.
I think the whole point of Linux was to keep developers safe and keep their code safe, kind of. So it's not easy to hack them.
I don't know. I'm a Linux guy myself. Like I haven't really lived in the Microsoft ecosystem. I'm sure there's some Microsoft dudes that would beg to differ. So I can't speak too much to it, but Linux versus other operating systems aside, there's some other concerns. Like for example, the folks that have kids. Let's say we were hosting our website. If your kid came over and closed the screen on your MacBook, website's down. I mean, if your website is a game server and all of a sudden somebody comes over and closes your laptop, or maybe they unplug your laptop and all of a sudden it runs out of power, well, the game server goes down, or whatever you're hosting on your computer. So all those are really good reasons why, they're all good reasons why we shouldn't deploy our code onto our MacBooks. It's totally fine for us to work on our websites on our MacBooks, but to host them, to keep them running and to have them available for up and available 24/7, that's where we look to the cloud. Here's all of the brands and logos that you might have seen. There's any number of different choices that you can make in terms of where you want to host. When we see each other at the close to the end, a couple of weeks before graduation, when we see each other, I'm going to be showing you how to use some of these. But really what we're looking for is we're looking for some business that's going to give us a computer, going to give us a solid internet connection, is going to be able to handle the traffic that we throw at it. Like every successful company always has this period where the amount of traffic they're receiving suddenly skyrockets, either because they got some sort of popularity or some viral popularity that triggered a bunch of traffic. So we need something that's going to handle any sort of surge in traffic, and we won't have to worry about maintaining physical computers. It's possible for us to go and buy physical computers and put our website on it, but that's a whole nother deal. So that's where deploying to the cloud comes in. We need somebody that's going to be able to take care of all of this for us. We just focus on writing the code and pushing the deploy button. I'm going to skip demoing how to run your own cloud today. Then there's different tiers of cloud hosting, there's different tiers of website hosting and different types of offerings that each vendor will provide you with, each cloud will provide you with. The simplest tier, what we're going to be dealing with today, is file hosting. And really all file hosting is index.html, CSS, JavaScript. You got some files, maybe some images. We're going to go and put that somewhere and serve it. So pretty simple. You just have some files and that's it. This is where the word static website gets thrown around. You just have a website, has HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and really that's it. That's kind of all that it does. So lots of people will offer file hosting because file hosting is relatively cheap and simple. In fact, when you go to buy a domain name, most people will try to sell you file hosting just because it's really cheap and kind of a moneymaker for some businesses. The next tier up, which we'll look at the next time that we meet, close to the end before graduation, this is more towards running back-end code. So during the program, you're going to learn front-end code with JavaScript. Then you're also going to learn some back-end code, again with JavaScript, but executed with Node. And when you start running back-end code, you're going to need actual servers to execute and run those back-end programs. Think of those back-end programs as being things like code that allows users to log into your website and check users against a database, or verify that they're able to log in, verify that, or be able to send emails when someone has signed up on the website. So application hosting is more comprehensive than file hosting. It includes a lot of other bits and products that allow you to handle more stuff, provide more interactivity, and offer your customers more things. But that's just a little breakdown of how application hosting works. Instead of having a static website, you move towards having a dynamic website where, you know, your website actually changes when someone logs in. Instead of taking the home page after they log in, now you're showing them their home page or something like that. And then I'm going to kind of gloss over these. Container hosting is one more tier up, where instead of just files or instead of applications, there's an actual format called containers. And this is where you start to see some of the really big players like Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud. I'm sure some of you have heard of these things, but this is definitely kind of the higher level. And then this opens up. Has anybody here heard of virtual machines before?
Yep.
So yeah, as we kind of go higher up, like we've talked about static files, we talked about applications. When you get up to containers, we're talking about, okay, we're going to actually bundle up an entire operating system and put that out on the web. So, you know, we're going from simple to most difficult. But container hosting, this virtual machine and Docker, this is also a really popular layer. And then if you come to office hours, and if anybody's actually interested about talking about this, you could just flat out rent servers. So give me, you can go to any of these companies and say, you know, give me a 46 core server with 6 petabytes of disk space attached to it and 10 gigabit per second network links. You can fully customize exactly what kind of server you want, and as long as you've got enough money, they'll provision it for you in seconds. So this is kind of, yep.
How would, if we're not like really super great with that, but we still wanted to buy storage, how would we know what we need? Their standard package or something?
Yeah, I guess it would depend on what kind of storage you're looking for. Like if you're looking to store files or you're looking to store, you know, pictures or something like that, don't use these guys because you're going to pay way more than you would at like on Google Drive or something. But if you just need storage for your application, then you would need to probably bust out a napkin at least and start doing some math. Like, are you thinking like of the situation where maybe you wanted to run an image hosting website, how you would go about doing that?
Yeah, I was just curious. And just in general, like, I know I need a ton of storage, but I don't necessarily know how to break it down, like what you were just saying. And
Yeah.
when you're done, can you just look in the chat? There's a couple questions in there.
Yeah, sure. So Amazon has, I'm an Amazon fanboy, so I've got to put a plug out there, but Amazon has something that's pretty cool called EBS. And Elastic Block Store is pretty much, you can attach a drive onto a server and say, you know, I want this much storage, and it will initially start at that size. And then based on how much you put onto that storage, it will continue to grow. So it could effectively act like a infinitely large disk drive. You pay a lot of money for it because of how convenient that power is. But if you didn't want to do the napkin math and figure out how much space you need and what the prices were, Amazon has a really cool product offering called EBS that you can look into.
I think the file hosting, like for like prototype web pages like we are gonna make, I think the Netlify is a good option. It also deploys it for you with the actual like a link that you can share on your portfolio. And I think I did a couple of projects on that so far, but I never used any of the other hosting server, whatever it's called.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about Netlify. Like they're a really popular file hosting service. Yeah, we're going to use GitHub Pages for ours, and I don't like, it's one of those things where you just have to kind of go and look and see what you have to go and look and see how they do what they do. Like with GitHub Pages, there's a certain file size limit for how much you can upload. There is an SLA, an uptime guarantee that they give you. And there's a bunch of quirks with GitHub Pages that we'll look at here in a minute. Netlify is going to have the same sort of thing. Like
It is same. It's about the same. Just a little bit, I think, more storage, but I don't think as much. But
yeah. So everything that I'm showing you, all these different products, all these different vendors, they all have their quirks. They all have their pros and cons. There really is no right answer for all of this. I am using Mozilla. I'm just using Firefox because I don't know why. I just have used it for a while. I don't necessarily. I would, as a developer, I think Chrome kind of has the best experience for dev tools. So probably stick with Chrome. I think Max probably pushes that during the capstone, or sorry, the program. In office hours, let's talk about that tomorrow. I'm pushing for Saturday, but we can move that to whenever is convenient for folks. Yeah, again, each cloud provider is a little different. I'm just gonna go with GitHub Pages because it's kind of the easiest one to use. If you like Netlify, feel free to use Netlify. So let's talk a bit about how we deploy websites with GitHub Pages. So as a few of you have already noticed, we've actually deployed already. When you commit and push using that special format that we used for our GitHub repo, that actually created a website for us. So we've already done the website deploy. There's just a couple of rules, and they pertain to how you set up these personal GitHub pages. And a personal GitHub page is where you create a repo called your GitHub username.github.io. There's a couple of rules. Primarily, the big ones to keep in mind is, yeah, you have to name your repo that special format. The repo needs to be public, not private. And then you need to have an index.html on the root of the repo. Otherwise, GitHub doesn't know how to serve your website. So for example, my deluxe.github.io, if I take that and I open it up and I just go into a browser, like for example, Safari, and I paste that in, you'll see that this is Max's code from earlier. So go ahead and grab your website. So your username.github.io, and you should see that you have performed a deploy, that you have code there. And then once you have seen that your website is working, come on over to this GitHub portfolio links. I'll post that link again in chat. Come on over and put that link to your website here in the GitHub Pages column. Stop share for a minute.
that's actually really cool. The GitHub.io.
Yeah.
It's actually really, I love it now. I mean, I never used it. I'll go with the Netlify or anything. This is better.
I'll give a couple disclaimers here in a minute. There's definitely some downsides to it, but
It's to showcase your product just for employers or something.
Yeah.
Their option. But when you're actually deploying something, then obviously you're gonna need a server and somebody who can watch your, watch you over a little bit.
But I think it's pretty slick. I mean, if you just do all this stuff with GitHub, you kind of get it for free, which is pretty impressive.
Can you show us how to get the link again, please?
Yeah, so it should just be your username, your GitHub username .github.io. So throw that into the browser and that should take you to your personal website.
So we can rename all the other projects that I have with the .github.io, or what is it?
Nope, it's just for this one. It's called a personal page on GitHub, and if you do it's special. If you do your GitHub username .github.io, it will create this. We'll talk about project pages here in a minute. That will do some of what you're alluding to, creating more of these.
I may have to stick with Netlify, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, again, this you'll kind of see the quirks here. There's some stuff that you may or may not like.
Is it just, oh, am I frozen? Crap.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me still? I'm frozen. Is it just me? I can't do anything to my screen right now. It's frozen, but I'm not on that Excel spreadsheet. I do
Are
wear
you-
glasses and I don't have my contacts in, but my screen is frozen, so I can't even double check right now.
I had to restart my computer. It happened.
Yeah,
to
me too. What just happened? I can do nothing. Wow.
Ooh, not a glitch.
Right. Oh God, I don't even know what to do. It's not letting me click anything. Well, I'll have to log back on. I'll see you guys in about 60 seconds. Yes.
Tara, I love your website. I gotta share my screen really quick. I just want to say I love your website because your about section just has Pepsi in it. That's awesome.
Oh, I forgot to do on my undo my changes. I was just on the history part of it and I was like, oh, go here to undo my changes. And then I never clicked it.
I think it's great. I think you should leave it as is. I think that's really cool.
Nate, please excuse me. I can't unmute because I'm frozen, but how do you get to the task manager on a Mac again?
You can open up Spotlight and type in activity manager or activity monitor. Spotlight is command spacebar.
Awesome sauce.
Nice. Brandon, I like your colors. Garden Deep, I like your blurb.
Here we go. Okay. And can I get back to Zoom?
Pepsi sucks. Shots fired.
Oh, I want to see it. Crap. Where's my Zoom?
It's kind of nice. Oh, nice centering. I like the font. Jose. Nice.
To average 30 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists on the winning team in the finals. Fueled by years of color.
How did my core site remove from there?
I think other people accidentally edited.
Okay, so again, don't do it again.
Okay, let's try this again.
While winning his fourth ring, the first without Shaq, was a career-defining moment, it was obvious that Bryant still wasn't satisfied easing up his hunt for rings. After all, his idol and eventual mentor had been able to win 6 during the Bulls' historic.
Can we try, Nate, you want us to try everybody turning off their cameras to see if it helps Rain? Sometimes it helps if everybody.
I appreciate it. I doubt that's gonna help. I literally have to restart my computer. I don't know what happened and it's not allowing me to select anything nor turn off mute. So if you hear ESPN, I do apologize about that, everyone.
2009-2010 season.
I put the wrong link in there. Where do you go to retrieve the link again?
You should just be able to go to your username.github.io, like
And just copy and select it, right?
yeah, just paste it in.
Okay, there
There you are. So yours is actually going to be this.
Pause. God.
Wait. Let's see. Oh, so we've got one issue here where the format needs to be Corwin. Wait, I'm not sure. Sorry about this. So Corwin, I'm looking at yours. So I grabbed this, and you should be able to just paste this in. But the reason why is because there's a 1 in the repo name, so it needs to be your GitHub username .github.io. I think you can fix this pretty easily by hitting settings. Like, for example, on mine, you can go to settings, and then right up here at the top where it says repository name, just rename it and drop the 1. Nice. And then I don't know if it will pick up the change. So what you should do is make a commit and push it up, like just change something small and push it up. And I think that will trigger the deploy. Oh, no, it actually just kicked off. Actually just kicked off, so I don't think you'll have to make an edit at all.
Thank you.
And then the link to your website is now just this. So I'm gonna edit your, there we go. Rain is getting stuff figured out. Asma, how are you doing? Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, let's talk about this a little bit. At this point, if you want to make any kind of change, if you want to update your website, all you really need to do is commit and push, and it will, within a matter of a couple minutes, it will get updated. So, for example, I'm going to go to my website. Here it is. And you can see it says I'm a good enough instructor. If I want to change that, I'm feeling a bit more confident. From a good enough instructor to a decent instructor, all I need to do is save, commit. Oh, is it? Push. And then I can go back to GitHub and look. Now notice over here that there's this yellow circle. That is the progress indicator for the deploy. Once this goes from a yellow circle to a green check mark, you'll know that that the website's actually finished. So I can come over here and refresh, and you can see that it still says good enough instructor. But once this goes from this little spinner, once this goes from being yellow to green, the deploy will be finished.
Can you put the Google Docs back in the chat? I had to restart.
Yep.
You know,
Here is the link. Before I switch over to you, Kenny, let me just show, okay, so notice how that yellow circle is turned to a green check mark. Now, if I go back over to Safari and refresh, sure enough, it now says I'm a decent instructor. So just know that when you commit and push, it's not an instant thing. It's going to take GitHub a couple of seconds to build your website and push it. And you can always check the status by going to your GitHub page, or to your GitHub repository, and looking for that green check mark there. Okay, got it, Kenny. Nice. There's always a little bit of lag when you push stuff, so just be patient. And 9 times out of 10, yeah, 9 times out of 10, you just need to refresh, or just give it a second to breathe, and then it will fix itself. Right. So again, the issue that I see a lot of folks run into is they go and push code and they don't have an index.html. If you don't have an index.html up here, there's obviously no way to deploy your website. So if you don't have an index.html here, it won't deploy. But from all of the spot checking that I've done so far, it looks like everybody pretty much has a successfully deployed website, which is great. All right. So GitHub Pages gives you one personal page. And again, when I say personal page, I mean that funky formatting, username.github.io. But you do get these unlimited project pages. And the way project pages work is they are hung off of your personal page. And I'll give an example of that. But the rules for a project page are slightly different. It doesn't need to be that funky name, so you can literally create any repository named whatever you want, and give it a project page. It just needs to be public, and again, it needs to have an index.html, because how are you going to serve it if it doesn't have a starting point to serve from? So I'm going to walk through. Setting up a project page. This is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to create a new repository called, let's see, I don't know, banana. I can't spell BAN. Banana. Is that how you spell banana?
You have one too many on the front end, one too many
Okay.
ends.
Oh yeah, okay. Good enough. So I've got a project called Banana, and I need to make sure that it's set to public. Am I good to create my repository? My project page?
Do you want them to add a README or a description or?
Good catch. Yep. We need to make sure that we always, when we're creating a new repository, make sure that we're adding a new README file. And then, yeah, adding a description would be nice. This is where I store my Banana counting code. All right. So let's say that I wanted to have a website for my Banana project. What's the workflow for working on our code for the Banana repo? Open up GitHub Desktop. Let's go and add a new repo. Gonna clone the repository. I'm gonna hit the refresh so it picks up all of my new repositories. There it is. There's Banana. Clone it down. So now my machine, my Mac, and GitHub are in sync for this new Banana repository. Open up VS Code. Hide that. Open up VS Code. All there is a README in here, and it's fine. But I want to have a website for Banana, so I need to create new files. Anybody know what the new file should be called? I want to create a website for my banana repo.
That's
Index.html.
Exactly. Starting to become a muscle memory. It's always the jumping off point for your website. I know that this isn't valid syntactic HTML, so just bear with me because I'm not an HTML expert here, but I do know that there's a head section. I know that we can have a title, it's gonna be banana, and then in the body, I'm just gonna have. Can someone paste a banana emoji in chat?
Control Command Space.
Control Command space.
Banana.
Banana. Thank you. All right. Save, go back. This looks good. That funky marker that you see right there, that red circle with a bar across it, that just means that there's not an end of file character. As you can see, my code ends here on line 8. If I want that to go away, I can just add a new line at the end of this, and all of a sudden that funky marker goes away. All right, my new banana website. Cool.
what if you already have the files that you want to add? You just let the
Yeah, if you have files that are already ready to go, then you would go back into GitHub Desktop, open up the repo using Finder or something like that. So I'm in my special banana folder that's linked up with my repository. From here, I would just drag and drop those files in.
all right, because I have a project that I want to drop in there.
Sure, yeah. So you don't necessarily need to create files from scratch in VS Code like I did. Just open up Finder and drag whatever you want over. All right. So this is not my personal GitHub page, which means that I can't just take banana and tack, go to like banana.github.io. I can't just tack that on there and visit my website. We're creating a GitHub project page. So what we have to do is go back and go into settings. And to turn this into a website that could actually be deployed, we're going to go down to the pages section under settings. And then there's this box here that says GitHub Pages is currently disabled. If you're doing a project page, not a personal page, if you're doing a project page, you have to come in here, flip this box from none to main, and hit save. That will enable the project page for this website.
So
Now, if we want,
that's something we have to do like every time we create a page, or since we've done it this time, like you won't have to do it again.
exactly, you just have to do it this one time for any new project that you want to have a custom website for. You didn't have to go and do this for your personal page because you named it in a special way and you get this one for free. But for any new project that you want to have a website deployed for, yeah, you'll have to go into settings, come down here to pages, and turn on GitHub Pages for that website. So after a second or two, again, because the website gets built and deployed behind the scenes, we could have gone and looked at banana. We could have come here and seen that spinner, that yellow. We could have seen that go from yellow to green. But I didn't. I just refreshed because it has been a long enough time. Now there's a link here, so I can go ahead and click on this. And now I'm looking at my banana project page. And this is what I meant by project pages are hung off of your personal GitHub page. Notice how in the URL, it's my personal page followed by my project page. So in order to get to this GitHub project page, I have to first navigate to my my personal GitHub page. Any questions about that?
Oh yeah, so I tried to do the GitHub pages, but it didn't work. It's not showing me anything. Like I don't know. It's not the same as yours.
Can you share your screen?
Yes, sir. 1 second.
Cool. So it says GitHub pages is currently disabled right there right here. So switch that from none to main,
Oh, okay.
hit save. All right. So again, we can either go and navigate to the front of the repo to watch that spinner go from yellow to a green check mark. So if you navigate to gflix clone, so scroll up.
Oh,
Scroll up all the way and just click on that. Yep. So notice the spinner. So right now it's deploying it. If you give it a second or two, this build and deployment job will finish.
okay.
So go ahead.
This is gonna be every time to every project that I have to do.
No, you don't have to do. You don't have to make a website for every project that you do. But if you want to have a free website for your HTML, and you aren't doing it on your home website, your personal website, then yeah, you'll have to do this one time for your repo.
And this one is like stuck here. Why is that? It's not pushing it. The monster.
I don't know. It would be safe to exit out of GitHub Desktop and reopen it. Yeah, you can Command Q to like force quit it. Yeah.
I have a question.
Oh, okay. Has to be. The thing has to be pushed.
Try push it now.
There you go.
Yeah, it just got stuck. Just before we jump to the next question, hop back to the Gcloneflix website.
Yep. What was it?
Gflix clone. Yep. You've got a green check mark. Cool. Now to get that URL, you can either form it yourself in the URL, but you can also click on settings and go back to that pages, and there should be there should be a link right there.
Okay. Perfect. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, work. Good.
Nice. Very cool.
All right. Thank you.
Somebody else had a question?
Yes. So I created a repository online on github.com. Now, if I copy my files, index.html and CSS files, into the directory on my computer, does that upload it too?
It will, so long as after you drag those files in to that special folder, so long as you commit and push using the GitHub desktop app, yeah, it will get uploaded.
Okay, so I copied it. I don't know what to do now. Like, do I fetch origin? Okay. All right, see my screen?
Yep.
So I
initial commit. Okay.
Right, I copied them here, and these
All
are
right. This looks great. Yeah. So go ahead and make a commit and push it. So in that box, it wants you to type in. So say something. Yeah, exactly. Added files, whatever makes sense to you. Go ahead and go ahead and push. Now, because this is the Netflix front end project, so this is not your personal repo that your username.github.io.
Right.
Since this is not that special repo, oh man, yours is getting hung too. That the pushes should usually be pretty quick, except for I can see it taking a little while if you added if the images are pretty large. Is the image folder pretty big?
probably. I didn't check.
Get info.
Yeah, but that one took really quick on mine. Like it was really quick thing.
That's only 1.8 megabytes. That's not big. That's strange. So go, yeah, click into here, Command Q to force quit this. You won't lose any files. It's just
Command Q.
yeah, Command Q to quit out of it, and then just open GitHub Desktop again. It usually doesn't freeze like that. It's strange that we've seen that 2 times in a row. And then open up GitHub Desktop using Spotlight. So Command and Spacebar. Open up the, yep, and then start typing in GitHub Desktop. Perfect. All right, now try pushing it again. Should be quicker.
Yeah, it says like 0 change file. So does that mean everything is up?
Not yet. So you've created the commit. Notice, like you just saw in history, notice that you have all those changes there. You
Mhm.
just haven't pushed them up to GitHub yet. So hit that push origin button. Grab my marker. Hit this again.
Okay, got it.
Do me a favor, click on this viewing on GitHub link button right here.
Refresh. Yeah, it just opened.
Yeah, strange. I don't know, understand why it's getting hung. Go back to GitHub Desktop. The program behind you, yeah. Very, very strange.
That's okay. I can give it a restart and we can get back to it later if I'm
Okay,
taking.
sounds good. Yeah. Well, at least let me at least talk to me after class. Let's figure out what's going on there.
Thank you.
I also had a question about Max shared something about student guide or something on Slack. What is it? Hold on. Let me
Oh, the
see.
student pack?
Yes.
Yeah, check it out. It's I know Max, follow the instructions that Max posted there. It's basically a bunch of discounts and coupons and cool stuff that you can use, services that you can check out. Sakota.
So I just had a question. Is there any way that we could change what like the URL says for the?
Yeah, you can. Let me share my screen. Yeah, so remember that. So, well, let me turn this around and ask you, what part of the URL would you want to change?
So I guess I'm wondering, does it always have to have the GitHub attached to it, if that makes sense?
That totally makes sense. No, it doesn't, and that's what we're going to work on next.
Okay.
Just like how we're going to talk about buying a domain name and linking it up so it looks exactly how you want. As far as changing this, though, this is driven off of the name of your repository. I named my banana, so that's gonna be in the URL. I can't change that unless I name my repo something else. The github.io, that's got to stay the same. And then the username at the beginning is obviously whatever you pick on GitHub. But we could change all of this, and we're going to do that this week. Great question. Genevieve?
My screen's looking nothing like yours. I can't get to that hub pages part.
Do you want to share your screen? Show us. Yeah, so you are so are you looking to make a project?
No, I was just
Hey.
trying to like follow along with yours, and I think I got lost a little bit when you were redoing it. You were on that white page where same thing Goggin had. It was a little drop down.
Yeah. So if you want to, like, for example, you've got this desktop tutorial, right? If you wanted to serve a website from that, if you click on the desktop tutorial repository, go over here to settings. there's a pages section right here. And the drop down we're talking about was right here. So if you wanted to turn this into a project page, yep, you would click on main and you would hit save. Now, just for fun, let's go ahead and do that. So yeah, hit save. And then, yeah, so there's a couple of reasons why this wouldn't really work well in this repo. First off, this is a private repo. And then the other thing, if you click on desktop tutorial, go back to the front page of the repository. Can anybody else point out the other issue? With this being with using this to serve a website from?
There's no HTML in it.
Exactly, there's no index.html. So we can actually expect to see this spinner go from yellow. It'll probably go red, I'm guessing, because it's going to try to deploy, but it won't find an index.html. It might fall back and serve the README as the website, which is possible. So if you go ahead and refresh, I wonder. Go back to the front page of the repository. You can get to it by clicking on that. Yep. Oh, yeah. So it did go green. So let's actually take a look and see what the URL is. I bet it will serve that README. Yep. Click settings. Let's go back to the GitHub pages section. Now you've got this link here. So if you click on that. Yeah, so one thing GitHub pages will do is if you don't have an index.html, it will fall back to serving your README. That's kind of cool.
Okay. All right, thank you. Sorry, I just got a little lost there and I was like, where am I going for this?
Yep. No, this is really bonus stuff right here. This is for those folks that, like, this week, I'm mostly interested in folks being able to deploy their own personal website. This is kind of bonus. This is for the folks that want to create websites for additional projects.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Nate, Alize has a question. She may need to share a screen, but.
Yeah, go for it, Elsie.
Sorry, I just I don't know. I missed the part between, like, I have the banana thing that I just made. I'm not really sure if we were following you along for that, but it won't, like, I'm trying to clone it. It's like clone from the internet. And it won't work.
You don't need to clone my banana repository. I was just using that for funsies.
Oh.
Yeah. Don't feel like you're like you have to follow along exactly with me. I'm mainly just showing you and pointing out in the slide. So if you're ever interested in creating additional repositories for other stuff that you're interested in showing, like your Netflix project, feel free to. Okay, let me go back. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, so we already kind of covered this. If you run into an issue and you don't know why your website isn't showing what you put up there, check that green box. I want to show you what a failure looks like, and you don't need to do this on your end, but I really want to show you what it looks like when that isn't green, just so you have an idea of what to look for. So if I delete the index.html and the README, so GitHub has absolutely nothing to fall back on. Commit and push. So at this point, there's nothing in my repository. There's no HTML, there's no README. I don't have any idea how GitHub would possibly know how to create a website from nothing. I'm expecting this to not go green. I'm expecting to see it go red, and then show you what that looks like, so you can debug that if you ever come across this in the future. Another thing that you can do, and some students have done this when they're deploying their website, is again not having a file called index.html, so having something like an about.html. In which case, having an about.html, that wouldn't be enough to deploy because you don't have an index.html. Wow, it still turned green. I was not expecting that. Okay. Well, I don't know how to break GitHub, so you might run into a situation where this breaks. If you do, you can dig into the logs and try to uncover what's breaking here and how to fix it by clicking onto the details for any one of these jobs. Alternatively, you can also ask for help in Slack, and I'd be happy to help troubleshoot. But from the portfolio links, it looks like most everybody has been able to get a website up, so great job. I also want to point out there's, if you noticed earlier, the way that this works is project pages are hung off of your personal GitHub page. And that can lead to interesting situations. Like every once in a while, one of the students will create a repository called images. We've had this happen in the past where they've created a repository called images, and that's ended up being a valid URL off of their GitHub page, but it's caused what we call a collision. So take, for example, my personal website. My personal website is deluxe.github.io. If my personal website has a folder called images on it, it will look like in the URL, it will look like deluxe.github.io/images, right? And that will be a valid folder off of my personal website. But if I go and create a repository with a project page called images, that will also be a valid URL. And so you can run into these sorts of weird collisions with GitHub pages just because these project pages are hung off of the same URL. They're attached to the same personal GitHub page. So all that to say, don't create a repository called images. It's a really common one that will trip people up. Don't create a repository called src or source. Just those kind of common folder names. Try to shy away from those. All right. I do have a section talking about deploys the hard way. If you're interested in learning about deploying to a physical server, I'm happy to talk about that during office hours. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about DNS. That to segue back to what Sequoia was saying about how do we effectively get a prettier URL. So instead of our username.github.io, how do we get something that looks really nice, like facebook.com or reddit.com or a nice .com website? But the answer is really DNS. And it boils down to how do we Sequoia put it perfectly, how do we take that github.io and turn it into something that users can remember and type. And so DNS is essentially how the internet translates those human readable names. So facebook.com translates that into what's known as an IP address. Is anybody here familiar with IP addresses or worked with IP addresses in the past?
Yes, I do that from time to time.
Yeah, either from like gaming, it's really popular to have to know a little bit about IP addresses. Was that Mo? What context have you worked with IP addresses in?
I'm a technical support engineer at a pharmaceutical company, so you kind of gotta use them. I also do a little ethical hacking, so like I learned how to set up a proxy server through a virtual machine and kind of get a little crazy with that.
Oh, nice. Okay. So yeah, you know a little bit about IP addresses. For the rest, for everyone else, I'm gonna kind of be pretty simple with the explanation. When you type in URLs into your browser, something has to translate it from the human readable name like google.com or facebook.com. Something has to translate it from the human readable into this into these sets of numbers, or more accurately octets. And these addresses can change as servers and computers join and leave the internet. So DNS, really, you could think of it as sort of this big phone book that allows us to answer these questions. So given this human readable name, what is the address that I can reach the computer that's serving the website or the application? So right now, we're actually, well, we use DNS every single day without knowing it. Whenever we type something into our phones or our computers, we're using domain name services to translate those human readable into IP addresses. Right now, when we go and visit our website, so when I visit my deluxe.github.io, that is getting translated into GitHub's server IPs. So GitHub exposes a set of servers that we can, GitHub exposes a set of servers that right now is serving our GitHub page. There are a number of these phone books, a number of these DNS, what are called providers. There's a number of these DNS services available on the internet. Google runs some really popular ones. Cloudflare has some as well. Your ISP also offers one of these phone books. So for example, if you're, let's say you use Verizon for your phone, when you go and you're using 5G and you're surfing facebook.com and you type Facebook into the browser on your Verizon phone, Verizon is probably going to be the one to provide you with their phone book. They're going to be the ones to take facebook.com and translate them into IP addresses. If you're using if you're using Chrome, or if you're using some sort of Google product, you'll probably end up using Google as your DNS provider. One of the interesting, speaking of ethical hacking, one of the interesting things about providing a DNS, about being a DNS provider, is that if you operate the phone book, you kind of control traffic. If you control the phone book and you can say who belongs to what with DNS, you can send people to malicious places. It's called DNS poisoning. It's a security attack. But also there's privacy implications with running your own DNS provider. If you're asking a service, I want to visit facebook.com, they know when you're visiting facebook.com and they have a record of it. And that's true for basically any website that you visit. So I usually during class, I like to recommend that if you are savvy with your router and you know how to log into your router and look things up, your ISP, when they set like Spectrum, when they set you up with a router, they probably set it up to use Spectrum DNS, which is super creepy. I don't really recommend that you use ISP DNS providers, just because they snoop on all of your traffic. The Google one's pretty good, and the Cloudflare one is pretty good. So if you're comfortable with the router and you kind of know a little bit about what I'm talking about, feel free to check that out. But you don't really need to know any of this necessarily to get a pretty URL for your website. You really just need to have a basic understanding of what DNS is and what it does. It translates human readable names into numbers. And what we're going to do is we're going to buy a domain and we're going to point it at your GitHub website. And so when we buy a domain, what we're really buying is an entry in a DNS phone book. And that entry gets spread across all of the other DNS providers. So every time you buy a domain name, you're really just it's kind of like taking out an advertisement in a phone book. You're really buying a spot across all of the other phone books. So anytime someone goes and visits the domain that you bought, you will control what computers that traffic gets sent to. Any questions about that so far?
Nate, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you know how we use inspect to view the code of a page? How would we view the IP address of a page?
Good question. There's a tool called Dig, and you can get to it using your terminal. I'm going to show that really quick. Has Max shown y'all how to use a terminal yet?
Yes, we're doing JavaScript now on VS Code at least. If that's
We haven't been working in the terminal yet.
Okay.
Been doing it in VS Code, but not.
online. No.
Okay. So I'm going to open up a terminal. Let's see, open an integrated terminal. So my terminal looks a little bit different than yours does. I put fun, this is why I have fun colors and all that jazz. Yours will look a little bit different, but it's the same sort of deal. I'm able to type at my terminal just like you're able to type. There's a cool program called Dig, and you can say dig and then pass it the name of a website. So like if I want to do google.com, it will tell me the DNS entry for google.com. It will tell me what the actual underlying IP addresses are. So this is all kind of nonsense that you can safely ignore up here at the top. Down here in this answer section, you can see that I got a response from the phone book saying google.com, it's an A record, and I should visit 142.251.211.238. And as far as which phone book I got the response from, it's this one's coming from the router here at my co-working space, and the router here at my co-work is a 192.168. Good question. You can use Dig. That's actually in the slides close to the end. I have a little section here with a couple other examples on using Dig.
You might get multiple IP addresses coming out depending on the website you're going on using that.
Yeah, exactly. Most places have multiple IP addresses because they want to have redundancy. If one of those, typically they're called load balancers, but if one of those load balancers goes down, it will balance to another one, which means there will be no interruption in traffic. And that load balancing happens at the ISP layer. It also happens in your browser. If you're not able to get a request from one of those IPs, your browser is smart enough to know to jump to one of the other IP addresses. Great point. Yes. It just so happened, and we can actually request for Google. We can actually request DNS entries from it, and we should. Okay, Google's not a great example here. We should see it we should see it change. Sometimes it doesn't. Let's do get that down. Nope. Well, I don't have a great example of it changing, but when you do dig requests, sometimes you can expect to see those results change, the IP address actually change.
Do you know in the terminal for Mac, I know it's not exactly bash, it's like a Z shell or whatever, but I know the Linux term you gotta use plus short. You gotta use the same thing in terminal on the Mac.
Yeah, it's super complicated, right? Because it's complicated because Mac isn't actually Linux. It's a variant of I think it's an old port of FreeBSD. So it's not like some commands on Linux won't work exactly on Mac. Like if we do dig short google.com, like this might, yeah, okay, so that works. Some of the I can't, it's the most frustrating thing in the world. Like sometimes the commands just don't line up with the Linux system that you're used to. But
Yeah,
for the most part, they do.
I use a virtual machine because it's just usually a little easier to get out.
Yeah, good on you. Like I've just drank the Kool-Aid for long enough with Mac that I know most of the time I know the difference between some of the popular commands, but like on Mac, sometimes you'll get a version of dig that works completely different. In addition to short, you can also do the @ symbol and request a specific DNS provider to return results. For example, I'm requesting results from 192.168.1.1. That's the ISP. That's the phone book that I have here in my co-work. If I go back to that list of popular DNS providers, I can actually specify which phone book I want to look up from. And now notice that I'm getting a response from Google's phone book. So you can actually use dig to go and look up not only what the IP address is that's associated with the domain name, but you can also request specifically from Google's phone book. Tell me what you think this is. You would only do this in specific situations where you're having DNS problems. Maybe you bought a domain name and it's taking a really long time for all of the other phone books to become aware of your new domain name purchase. But that's just a little thing you can do with dig. Other questions? Getting a little deep on dig. Thank you for bearing with me.
Just one last thing, is dig an extension or something I need to download on VS Code, or I just simply input dig into the terminal?
You just input it. It's one of those built-in commands that comes with your Mac.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, so we've already kind of talked about this. You can inspect and see under the hood what's going on when you make those requests. Again, this is really just for troubleshooting. When we buy the domain name, things should just work, but this is nice to have when we need to get to troubleshooting. We'll talk a bit more about this the next time that we meet, because this will matter a bit more. But just suffice to say that when we use dig and we do like dig google.com, there's different kinds of records, and the simplest kind of record in a phone book is, your name and the phone number, right? The same thing in DNS. The simplest kind of record is known as an A record, and it's really just an alias. It's given some human readable domain name. Here's an IP address to reach the server that it belongs to. But there's all sorts of other records. There's records for dealing with email. There's records for dealing with SSL certificates. There's a whole bunch of different types of DNS records, different kinds of things you could put in the phone book. And then just a little bit for your own knowledge, there's in addition to all of these phone books that are run by different companies, like Google runs their own, and VeriSign, Cloudflare, the really big players. There's also what are known as root servers, and this is the kind of the top of the, if you think of it as a big tree that all the phone books are based off of. There's roughly 13 of these servers that control most of what are called the root level domains. So the .com, the .net, those really big domain names. And these are all run by the IANA, the Internet Association. I don't remember the full acronym, but they are the guardians of the DNS system as we know it. And then just for your own knowledge, when we talk about domains, we're talking about a certain kind of hierarchy. There's a top level domain, or a TLD, that's .com or .net. When we go and buy our domain name, we're probably going to pick a .com just because it's the most popular. But then you have your top level domain, and then you have what are called second level domains. Most people just call this the domain. So that would be like Facebook or Google. So ignoring the com, ignoring the net, ignoring the org. That's the top level domain. But just the second level or more commonly referenced, just the domain is, that word that you see. So Google. And then subdomains is everything under that. So here at docs.google.com, the subdomain would be docs. And you can have any number of subdomains. You could chain those together. I think there is a limit for how deep the nesting for subdomains can go, but I'm not sure offhand what that is. And then protocol is HTTP or HTTPS. There's also FTP, SSH. There's all sorts of protocols that can be used on the internet. Some protocols. So the most common protocols you're going to see, though, and what we're going to deal with in class are HTTPS. So when we come back tomorrow, what we're going to do is we're going to purchase a domain, and we're going to purchase our domain from Namecheap. I would encourage you to not purchase a domain until tomorrow, but between now and tomorrow, be thinking about what a good domain name for your website would be. And the way that you can go and check to see if your domain is available is, I'll post the link here in chat. You can go to Namecheap and you can type in and see. So for example, I'm going to probably take cohort5.com. I'm going to go and search and see if that's available. Someone's already taken cohort5.com. Okay, well, I'll have to think of another one. But between now and tomorrow, be thinking about what a good brand name. If you can get your name, then that's pretty cool. That would make a really good domain name. But be thinking about
just no name whatever Namecheap, whatever. That's where we
Sorry, say it one more time.
That's where we have to go to get a domain name.
Yes, we're gonna buy all of our domain names through Namecheap. You can buy it through other places, but I really, really, really strongly encourage you to do it through Namecheap. But save that for tomorrow. Don't just go in here and search and see if you can and come up with some ideas for a good domain name for tomorrow. I mean, if you absolutely find something and you're like, I've got to snag this right now, I mean, go ahead and buy it. But if you can just plan on a good domain name for now, that would be the best thing to do.
Why does it say $150,000?
Yeah, don't spend $150,000. You'll have to get creative. There's a good price point between a good domain name and not paying a whole lot. Like, you should expect to your stipend should only suffer like a $7 hit. So.
A smart idea is every time a new artist comes out, just buy their domain and make the label buy it from you.
Domain parking, yeah. The other thing that a lot of people will do is they'll wait until domains expire. Sometimes people will just forget, and they'll be sitting on a really valuable domain, and it will expire, and someone will come along and make some money on that. That's it. That's all I've got for you. Tomorrow, we're going to link up our domain. We're going to buy domain names and link them up with our GitHub portfolio. And then I'm going to, tomorrow, I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about the terminal and getting you ready to use the terminal a little bit more and look like a hacker and impress your friends. And then finally on Thursday, anybody that hasn't gotten their domain name set up correctly, we're going to go through and make sure that everybody's got a working website. And if time permits, I'm going to go through the exercise and show you how to deploy your website on a physical server. That's kind of what we're looking
What's
at.
the price? Is it like it says retail $25 or is the upper one?
The price for a domain name?
Yeah. Because I see one that's I want to get this one.
You should be spending, like, for your first domain name, I think they'll give it to you for like $5.99, and then after that it jumps up to like somewhere between 7 and 12. So $5.98, there's a discount code if I use their promo code and I'm a new customer, so I think I could get it for $5.98. Yeah, this is roughly what you should be spending. But just be aware, the domain, if you found something that you really like it's been there. It's probably not going anywhere, and
Okay.
we can also do it tomorrow. So don't feel like you're in a big rush, but definitely be thinking about cool domain names, because you will be judged by your domain name.
And it doesn't have to be a .com. You can look at you can do .io or I did .dev. There's certain ones you can't get, which you probably know, like edu, you have to meet certain requirements, what have you, but.
There is also .gay. What the hell?
What is it?
There's a lot of
I don't know why would
adult.
they like the dot.
There's also
LOL.
yeah. Pick something that's appropriate.
I looked up T-Browser and it came up with $2,988.
Right.
I mean, it's a worthwhile investment, right? You just throw that on the credit card.
I'm like, where is the $5.99? Hold on.
I mean, how much is your personal brand worth to you? You got to invest in yourself, right? To make it. I don't know.
I'm buying a .com and a .io just in case.
Yeah, if you really like buying domain names, you really like collecting them, you can set them up to all points in the same place. Again, just ideate for now, plan, and we'll spend some money tomorrow. All right. Any other questions before we break?
I have one. Can we tomorrow also talk about like SSL certificates and all that? I know, but I know they're necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. We'll definitely talk about this tomorrow. It's a big part in this day and age, and if you're planning on running any kind of business that deals with sensitive data, yeah, you need to know about encryption. All right. Well, with that, I will see everybody tomorrow. Have a great rest of your evening. And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to stick around. Otherwise, that's it for tonight. See y'all tomorrow.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Have a great night, y'all.
Lush. I will sync up with Plosh on Slack. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, no problem. I think he said it went through, but I wasn't sure how he got it through. Good night.
Yeah, that's strange. Yeah, cool.
It could have been a delay. Who knows?
Yeah, twice in a row though. That's wonky.
No.
All right. Well, have a good night. See y'all.